Good evening, everyone. I'm Blythe Robinson. I'm the interim town manager. Thank you for coming tonight. This is the third of our presentations about the override. We do have a few copies of the presentation here. They're exactly the same as the one we did last week. So if you already got one, you're all set. The only thing you did is change the date. But you're welcome to them if you want to take them when you leave. We're going to change it up a little bit tonight and have Superintendent Powers go first because he hasn't figured out how to be in two places at once yet. I don't know why. And he needs to go to Rainham to a meeting they're having on the same topic. So I'm going to skip ahead to his slides, have him talk about school things first, and then we'll go back and talk about the town stuff. So.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I'm Ryan Powers, the Superintendent of Schools. For those of you that have seen this before, hopefully tonight is perfection. This is, as Ms. Robinson said, this is the third time we've gone through this. Really, my part tonight is really to explain and give you some context about the schools and what brings us here tonight and to the towns requesting what we realize is a significant amount of money. What I did want to share with you, though, this is just a screenshot of our website. All of the information that we're going to present tonight and that we've presented throughout the winter and spring, it's all located on our website. If you go to our website, you'll notice there encircled in yellow, we do have a budget tab. Past presentations are located there, supporting documents and supporting resources are all there as well. So I would just encourage you, if you do have questions after tonight or you're looking for more information, certainly visit our website. But also reach out. Certainly I do apologize having to sneak out a little bit early tonight. So if there's questions that I'm not able to answer because they haven't come up yet, certainly, again, feel free to reach out to me or to the district, and we'll definitely get you the answer. But I would definitely encourage you to visit our website. Good. So I really want to provide some context and background as to what brings us here to this point where we're requesting such a significant amount of money. And to do that, I want to kind of just give you some information about Bridgewater Rainham. We are currently the second largest regional school district in the Commonwealth. So across the state, only the Wachusett Regional School District is larger. We currently have 5,682 students. What is unique to Bridgewater Rainham that many other districts are in the area and even across the state is that our enrollment trend is heading in an increased direction, where most districts are reporting that their enrollment is going down. We're just counter to that. So at 5,682 students, that's actually 400 plus students over the last 5 years. The last 3 years, we've actually seen 100 plus students enroll every year. Obviously, as we're getting more students coming into the district, as you can imagine, more students, more costs. It just makes sense. So that's one of the factors that drives us. But obviously there are students, there are residents, they have a right to be educated within our school system. We welcome all of them, and we'll continue to welcome all the families that come. But obviously as we welcome more students, there are costs associated with that. So, that really is kind of what's driving us to start. The second thing, our challenges are not unique. You're going to obviously hear Ms. Robinson talk about some of the challenges with the town of Bridgewater. Town of Rainham are having similar challenges, and surrounding towns around us. Many of the towns that you drive through, probably on your way to work or in the area, you see override signs in their towns as well. Really what is happening is expenses are outpacing revenue. And it's the fact. It's not something, like I said, that's unique to Bridgewater Rainham. It's happening in the region, and we're not immune to that. And really where we're seeing some of our biggest costs, and I've tried to list them out there for you, first is health insurance. Obviously, we provide health insurance to our employees, and typically every year, through our insurance advisor, we're told to budget for about a 10% increase. Now, thankfully, each year that's come in a little bit lower, so we haven't necessarily seen a 10% increase. But this year, we were told to plan on a 20% increase, so almost double than what we normally expect. And really what was driving that were our high claims costs. And so what that means is the amount of our employees that were submitting high claims, because unfortunately they were ill or a family member were ill. And when I say ill, significant, maybe significant illnesses and medical challenges, that we had some submit over $1 million worth of insurance claims. And I'm so thankful that we provided them the insurance, because that's obviously a service that they needed, and they needed to get well, and in some cases they have, so I'm so thankful for that. But when we look at high claims costs, it was $2.3 million more this past year than the year before. So obviously when our health insurance company looks at that, and as our costs go up, their costs certainly increase. And so they came back and said, well, because your high claims costs have been significant, we're going to increase your rates by 20%. Now, in working through our insurance advisor and working with our insurance provider, we were able to negotiate down a lower rate. We did have to make some concessions. We had to switch dental plans from what our previous plan was to Harvard Pilgrim. And by doing that, we're able to lock in at a 15% increase. So still a significant increase, double from what we've actually seen, but certainly better than 20%. Now, obviously, we're also taking steps now to work with some of the municipal purchasing groups that exist. I know the town of Bridgewater is in one, the town of Rainham is in one. And so looking ahead to the following fiscal year, can we join one of those purchasing groups where, because they're larger, they obviously have more negotiating power, more purchasing power, and can typically lock in at a lower rate, 5, 6, 7% depending on the year, certainly not 15%. What we also anticipate is that hopefully our high claims costs come down, and so that we're not seeing 15% increases year over year. But unfortunately, that's the reality that we're currently faced with. So that's one of the cost drivers. The second one is special education. Now, we obviously provide special education services to students on IEPs, so individualized education plans, and we provide those services within the district. And some of our students actually have to go out of district, so to a school. It could be a day program, could be a residential school, because maybe their needs, their academic needs, medical needs are so significant that we don't have in-district programming to be able to provide those services. Again, these are our students. They have a right to be educated. They have a right to be educated within the district when possible. And we take every measure and step to ensure that happens. But we do find ourselves in situations where our programming just doesn't match the needs of our students. But what's important to note is that our number of students with disabilities, or our special education students, continues to rise as well. So I mentioned to you about the 5,680 students total enrollment. We're currently at 20% of those students are considered to be students with disabilities or our special education students. Again, when we look at trends over the last 5 years, 5 years ago, we were at about 16%. So you can see that that percentage continues to increase. So we're currently at 20%. So as we need to provide additional students those specialized services, those come with costs as well. And so in some cases, we've had to add additional staff within the district programs. We've found ourselves in a couple situations where, because the enrollment is increasing, we're not adequately staffing some of our programs. And so the state has come in a couple times to say your program, your classroom is actually out of compliance. You have too many students. And so you, in fact, have to hire more special education teachers. So we've had to do that throughout the year. And so obviously looking ahead to next year, as we are projecting that we're going to see even a greater increase of students coming in. Remember, we've been up, plus 100 every year. And obviously our percentage of students with disabilities continues to rise. So we're just anticipating that we're going to need more special education staff, because we don't want to just be teetering on the brink of compliance all the time. That's not what our students deserve. We want to make sure that our programs are solid, because the more we can enhance our programs within the district, that means, and it possibly means, that we're sending less students out of district. Now, just to talk a little bit about out-of-district costs, because at times those tend to be pretty significant. We have 16 more students this year than last year in out-of-district placements. When you look at those students, again, their academic, behavioral, medical needs can't be met currently within the district, within our current programming structure. So we did have to look at outside placements. And as I said, some of those placements are day programs, and some of those placements are residential facilities. So we currently have 47 students total in out-of-district placements. 16 more this year, but 47 total. 42 are in day programs, and 5 are in residential facilities. And again, because we have students in those programs, there's tuition associated with that. And so when we look at those 16 students that are now out of district programming, we have to provide transportation to and from their home to those schools. And we also have to pay tuition. Now, when we look at the cost of a transportation, so a special education van, we make every effort, especially if we have multiple students going to some of these day programs, to combine routes. And so we'll try to put 2-3 students on a van when we can, going to a certain day program. But if we have a student who requires a special program in a unique setting, that student may be the only one on the van. Depending on the distance of that van, we're looking at potentially $65,000 to $75,000 for the cost of the year just for the van. That doesn't factor in the cost of tuition. Tuition, again, depending on the program, really mirrors those numbers. So when we start to look at estimated costs, even if we were just to go round down for discussion's sake and say transportation was $50,000, tuition was $50,000, so $100,000 per student, 16 students at $100,000, we're now talking, obviously almost $2 million, 1.6. And those are on the low, that's on the low end. So if we were actually to use those actual numbers, now you can see where $2 million plus. That's just the day programs. When we look at residential programs, those residential schools can be anywhere from $250,000 to $500,000, again, depending on the program, depending on the need of the student. So you can see, again, where those cost drivers come in. And I think, we're, again, trying to do everything we can to enhance our in-district programming, because we know if we can shore up our in-district programming, that would allow some of those students to return, because we would be able to provide for them here in the district. So we're making every effort that we can. Certainly we're advocating for more additional staff to be able to enhance our programs. So again, asking for additional staff through an operational override. I did mention to you a little bit about transportation as related to special education, but I did want to talk about general transportation, so the big yellow school bus. Obviously, if we're adding students each and every year, 100 plus, we are potentially looking at having to add more buses to the road. As you know, we currently, or maybe you don't know, we currently operate a 3-tier system. So the buses, most of our buses run and do all 3 tiers, so the high school tier, the middle school tier, and then the elementary tier. A 3-tier bus is just shy of $100,000. So again, as we start to add more students and anticipate adding more students, we're looking at potentially having to add more school buses at a cost of $100,000. Now, Mr. Lucini of Lucini Bus, who's our transportation provider, does everything he can, again, to minimize our costs. When you look at our overall transportation costs, either special education or regular transportation, it's going up about 20%. But that's because of the number of students utilizing. It's not because the contract itself is going up 20%. When we look at the actual negotiated contract price, and we're in a multi-year contract with Lucini Bus that's negotiated approximately every 5 years, the contract itself is only going up by about 3%. But because we have more students that need transportation, specialized transportation, big yellow school bus transportation, that does drive the cost up. Now, some of you, and I'm in the same boat, you drive by some of our school buses and you say, that bus is half empty. Why can't they combine school buses and actually utilize less buses? So we're required by law as a regional school district to transport students over 2 miles. The district has actually chosen to transport students that live 1.5 miles and over, and here's the reason why. We are eligible at 1.5 miles for reimbursement. We do get reimbursed from the state. It's Chapter 71 Regional School Transportation Reimbursement. So if we were not to provide transportation to those students, we wouldn't be eligible for any type of reimbursement. So we do start at 1.5 miles. Now, all of those students from 1.5 miles up are eligible for the bus. So we have to leave a seat on the bus for them. So what happens is when you drive by a bus, say at the high school level, we can't factor in whether or not students will be getting their license, whether a parent will be driving, whether they might be going with a sibling or a neighbor. We have to assign them a seat on the bus. And so when they don't actually take the bus on any given day, we have to leave that seat empty. We can't say, oh, well, we're going to combine those two buses because those students have a right to that transportation. So what happens is on any given day, they may say, oh, I have to take the bus today. My ride fell through, and we have to make sure that we have a seat. Now, looking at the high school, I will say that we do oversubscribe at the high school level because we know students won't be taking the bus. So really, it's not reasonable for us to put 90 students on a bus. We would never do that, but scheduling purposes, we do. Now, at the elementary and middle school level, those students tend to take the bus. There's not a lot of wiggle room there. However, we do know that some parents are going to drive their students. And so we have to really predict, pretty close to accurate, how many seats are available based on how many students are eligible. And again, some parents choose to drive their students to school, pick their students up, one or the other or both. So sometimes the bus may be full in the morning, but maybe half empty in the afternoon, or vice versa. But again, at the same time, we can't say, well, on a pretty consistent basis, this bus is only half full, so let's combine it with another and eliminate a bus. We really have to continue to keep those seats available for the students that are eligible because their circumstances may change. So again, transportation as a whole is really driving up costs for us. The last is utilities. We're not immune. Many of you are feeling this at home, whether it's gas, oil, electric, utilities are increasing. Some of you have probably been a victim of those phantom delivery charges, and that's something that we're seeing as well because that's a way for the utility companies to, again, increase fees without really increasing their, the wattage and so forth. So that's something that we're dealing with. We have negotiated and entered into new utility agreements, but it's something that we're going to continue to look at. We're actually working with a third-party vendor now who's coming in to, again, review our utility contracts to try to negotiate better rates, even though we're under current contracts. His company has just taken a look at, say, our waste management and potential savings there. Again, it's a national company that can come in and has greater negotiating power than we do. And so we're going to kind of continue to look at all areas of the district and see if there's any additional cost savings. But we're already taking those proactive steps to be able to do that. But this is really what's driving up the costs. I think it's also important to note, when you see our school buildings, we have 7 school buildings. They are community spaces. We want our community members, we want you to be able to utilize them as much as possible when possible. But that means that we are opening some of our buildings, really almost all of our buildings, 7 days a week and full days. So that means we're lighting the building 7 days a week. We're heating the building 7 days a week. So even though we try to minimize costs, we try to cut down on power and utilities, we're not always able to, especially a hub like this, the high school. It's not uncommon, even in the summer months, to still see the building being used by various groups. So as much as we try to curb our utility expenses there, it does become very difficult. So these are just some of the cost drivers that obviously we're faced with on a daily basis and year over year. Unfortunately, what we find ourselves in a situation, as I shared some of those numbers with you, is that our increases this year are pretty significant. Good for the next one. And so what you see up here, and again, I know Ms. Robinson will cover these numbers, and I won't get into too much detail because she'll explain the impact of these numbers. But what you see on the left-hand side is what the school committee adopted as their budget. It's $106 million. We realize it's a significant ask. It's not lost on us. We know that it may place a significant burden on some of the taxpayers and some of the residents. But I and the school committee obviously has a responsibility to bring forward a budget that we think our students need and deserve. What is available right now is by both towns prior to any type of override vote is $96 million. So you can see, obviously, there's a significant difference there between those two. And so what I really want to do tonight is to talk about what the impacts would be for both, if we were to get an override or if we were to not, just because I want all of our voters, all of our residents to be informed, whichever decision you make. So obviously, with an override, as you would expect, there are going to be many positive impacts. And the first positive impact really is going to be around class size. We want to be able to increase our staff, minimize class size when possible. We want to be able to add additional special education staff to enhance our programs, as I mentioned. And then we want to make sure operationally that we're keeping up with all of our cost drivers and that we're offering every opportunity we can to our students. We want to make sure that they have access to all of their athletic and extracurricular opportunities. What we really hope to do is try to get to the low 20s for class size, especially at the primary grades. You know, when we hear from parents, and especially parents that work in other districts, when they say, our kindergarten classes average 20. Our kindergarten classes in some cases average 26 to 27. You know, those are significant numbers. And so when we look at our K-8 averages, on the Bridgewater side, we're at 28 students on average per class. On the Rainham side, we're at 26 students per average K-8. We really want to lower that to the low to mid-20s. You know, we really don't want to be over 25 in any class if we can help it. So certainly by adding staff through an override, we would be able to make significant progress towards that goal. We're still going to have some classes that are 25, 26, as you can see the ranges that we provided. But really our goal is to try to get to the low 20s, especially in the primary grades. Middle school, again, what we're really trying to get to is around that 25 number. We'd certainly love to be lower, but we want to make sure that we can at least try to get there. And then same thing at the high school level. Those numbers, 24 to 27, some of those numbers are a little bit higher because it may be an elective that students just love to take, and so the enrollment goes up. But again, looking to try to keep those numbers to the mid-20s where possible. And then obviously, as I mentioned, all current electives at the high school would remain. We wouldn't have to cut any. We wouldn't have to make any current changes to our extracurriculars or athletics. Without an override, though, we would be looking at a reduction of between 30 and 45 positions, 45 plus. And we give that range because obviously a lot of that's going to be dependent on how many staff that we're not able to bring back. Because what happens is every time we are unable to fill a position because we've laid a teacher off, we have to account for unemployment. And so it's really about a third. So when we look at that range, it really is going to be dependent on how many positions that we can't fill. We'll know how much we have to account for in unemployment, and then we'll really have a better sense of what the negative impact will be. We are making reductions across the board, so not just in teaching staff. We're making reductions in administrative staff, support staff, secretarial staff, facility staff. There's not any department that is immune to, unfortunately, these reductions. But I did want to share with you just what we're looking at for class size. K-2, our class size ranges would be 26 to 31. So we will have some of our classes at 31 students per class. Our teachers do an amazing job. And obviously, they're going to educate all the students that are in front of them. But having 31 students in a first grade class presents challenges. Our students are still learning their foundational skills. And having 31 students really creates a challenge for our teachers to be able to reach each and every student and provide them with their individual attention. 3 to 5, grades 3 to 5, again, the ranges would be about 28 to 33. And we give ranges because obviously we're talking about enrollment bubbles and trends as they go through the grades. 6 to 8, we would be looking at middle school averages of 30 to 36, depending on the grade level. Again, that's significant. Some of the challenges we're going to have there, especially say at the Bridgewater Middle School, is the size of the classrooms and how are we going to maintain 36 students in some of our smaller classrooms. And then at the high school, we will be pretty much 30 across the board, 30s across the board, with some classes being 40 plus. We're going to have some of our electives in some of our classes with more than 40 students. And we're also going to have to eliminate about 40 elective offerings. When we look at that, and you'll see a slide coming up, almost our entire business department will be wiped out, or really our business department will be wiped out, so we won't have any of those electives. We are going to have to reduce, eliminate, or self-fund extracurriculars and athletics. It's not something that I think anybody wants to do. We want to be able to, again, as I mentioned, provide those opportunities to our kids. but we spend almost $1 million on extracurriculars and athletics at the middle school and high school level. And again, if it's $1 million that we can then try to put back into the classroom, unfortunately, we may have to place that burden on families, which again, we know is going to be significant. Good. Here's just a slide with a little bit more information on if an override were to pass. You can see where initially we would try to add positions. And I'll talk about how many positions we're actually looking at in a few slides coming up. But right now, K-8 on the Bridgewater side, we would be looking at adding 10 positions, and K-8 on the Rainham, 4. Now, you might say, why 10 and why 4? As I mentioned in the beginning, the class size averages in Bridgewater are already higher than Rainham. So we really want to try to, as much as possible, create some equitable class sizes across the district. It's not always going to be possible. The numbers aren't always going to be perfect. But it did require us to add additional staffing on the Bridgewater side versus Rainham, again, to try to get to some type of equitable class sizes again. So 14 total right now at the K-8 level. As I mentioned, we want to try to increase our special education staff, so we're looking at a minimum of bringing on 6 special educators. Again, depending on the needs of our students and location, we already have identified certain areas where we know certain schools, certain programming that we're going to need to assign these special educators to. And Unified Arts, so Unified Arts is our art, PE, music. Believe it or not, we are going to have to look to potentially add additional Unified Arts staff, because what happens is as we're bringing on more teaching staff, more classroom staff, we have to make sure all of our students have those opportunities to go to PE, to go to music. Now, in speaking with our elementary principals, we feel like we would be able to cover art and music with our current staff level, but because our students take PE twice a week, we would need additional PE teachers. So that is reflective of that. So district-wide, we're looking at adding 8 additional staff members, and then at the high school, we're looking to add 3. 1 in social studies, 1 in world language, and 1 in mathematics. And the reason why those 3 areas were chosen, when we look at, again, enrollment in those 3 content areas, and where we've made reductions in staff over the last few years, those 3 areas have taken somewhat of a hit. So we're trying to bolster those back up. So that's why we identified those 3 areas to start. Now, what I do want to really point out is that we are doing everything we can to take a conservative approach if this override were to pass. Because what we don't want to do, this would be fiscally irresponsible on our part, is to ask the taxpayers for an override, have it approved, and then spend all of our money up front. And then what happens is 3 years from now, we're either having massive layoffs or coming back to you and asking for money. And that's the last thing we want to do. Now, obviously, we know some of our cost drivers may continue to be cost drivers, but we really want to take a conservative approach when we add positions. So with this override budget, we feel as though that we would be able to potentially add up to 37 positions. But because we want to take a conservative approach, I'm hesitant to add, and I know school committee is as well, to add all 37 positions right away. Because again, we feel like we really need to see how our cost drivers are doing over the next couple of years. And so we're taking a conservative approach. We're recommending that we add 25 positions initially, and then over the next few years really work up to get to that 37 number. Now, obviously, as our projections, in which you'll see in a future slide, we've done a 5-year projection. Once we compare our projections annually to our actuals, we'll have a better sense. Can we actually add staff at a faster rate, or do we need to add staff at a slower rate? But that will be done obviously on a year-to-year basis. But initially, this is what we plan to do. This is just some pictures of our amazing kids. Obviously, you're here because you care about them. Some of you may recognize some of these children. They may be yours or neighbors or relatives. But obviously, again, we want to make sure that they have every opportunity to succeed, not just in the classroom, but obviously out. Picture of our amazing rainwater players over there on the left. We have some of our students in a science lab in the middle, and then obviously our high school football team running out in the beginning of a game. So here's where I mentioned sustainability. And obviously what this is based on is prior year's trends. We really looked at how our revenue has come into the district, how our expenses have gone out, And so when we look at that, we obviously look at state aid, we look at district contributions and town funding, and then obviously we look at salaries and benefits, because really at the end of the day, we're a people-driven business. Operating costs, such I mentioned, transportation, utilities, and then certainly special education. Those are our big drivers. And so what we really did is we projected out using, again, past trends over the next 5 years. And you can see that, at the end of the 5 years, we still feel as though that as we're adding staff, that they will be sustainable. Now, as I mentioned, we will on an annual basis, again, compare our projections to our actuals to make sure that we're still on pace and that our trends are still heading in the right direction. And it may mean that, again, we need to, cut some operating expenses or look to different ways to try to save some operating expenses. Or we may not be able to add as many staff, or we might be able to add more staff, again, depending on the actuals over time. But we really feel as though a conservative approach is the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do out of respect for you, certainly if you approve this override. And so that's the approach that we're taking. Here's what would happen without an override. Again, as you can imagine, we're going to be losing staff, which I talked to you about already. But questions have come up about specifically where would we lose staff? What does that look like? You say we're going to have higher class size, but you show me where. And so this is just, again, a representation very similar to the chart that I showed you where we're adding staff. This is where we project that we're going to lose staff. Now, one thing that I should note is that both of these slides, the slide before where it showed we're adding staff, and then this one where we're losing staff, this is all based on current enrollment. So it's taking this year's students and rolling them up a grade. What it doesn't factor in is that 100 plus students that move in every year. And so what we anticipate to happen, both positive and negative, could change. We might have to add staff at a different grade level than what we're projecting right now, because all of a sudden we have a large number of first graders move in or seventh graders move in. Or this could change right now. We feel as though that we could reduce staff, where you see obviously the reds is where we're going to reduce staff, but that may change. We might say, well, we can't actually only lose one teacher, we're going to need to lose 2 teachers. Again, that could fluctuate with enrollment. Good. Really where the significant hit is going to be at the high school level. They are going to be down 20 staff members. Why the high school? Obviously we feel as though that we really need to preserve those early grades, K2, those foundational grades where possible. Preserving them, at the expense of the high school still means we're going to be 28 to 30 plus, as I mentioned, but at least we're not going to be 30 plus across the board in all of our primary grades. So unfortunately, working with the high school principal, we did look at all content areas. We looked at where we could eliminate positions. And this isn't great. This is not going to be great for our high school students. Myself, I have a high schooler. And so, as a parent, I have to wear that hat at sometimes too. And so, for me, I say, well, sure, I can appreciate the superintendent wants to keep, the elementary grades low. But as a dad, what about my child at high school? I want to make sure that she has every opportunity to succeed and be successful and go on to college and career. But as a superintendent, really, educationally, philosophically, I know that, that's really where we need to commit to. But either way, it's not going to be great. It's not going to be great for our high schoolers. It's still not going to be great for our elementary students as well. So you can see what the projected class size averages are going to be. We are going to have 7 classes with enrollment greater than 35. We're going to have 2 classes of 40 plus. We're going to be down a guidance counselor. Again, our guidance staff provide not just college and career advice, they provide counseling on a daily basis. For 1,500 students, we want to make sure that they all are supported. And then, our AP classes, again, those class sizes are going to go up as well. These are just some of the electives that we're unfortunately faced with eliminating. Again, you'll notice a lot of business classes, which is unfortunate. We are going to be down some of our AP classes. And some of our classes that really have developed a lot of interest over time by our students. Unfortunately, we're just not going to be able to offer those, either because the teacher that has taught those is no longer going to be here, or we just don't have the capacity to offer these courses anymore. I did mention, again, district-wide positions. So this is, we're just not putting the burden on teachers, although, certainly significant there. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of wiggle room when it comes to facilities and secretarial positions and administration. We don't have the numbers in those departments. But we are going to make every effort to reduce those departments just so that everyone, unfortunately, is feeling the burden. But we just don't, I can't say we're going to eliminate, 20 custodians or 20, individuals from the facilities department. That would be half our facilities department. We wouldn't be able to keep up and maintain our schools. So that's not feasible for us. I think, all of us realize, every department head realizes where the importance is. It's in the classroom with the students. But again, we also have to open school every day and make sure that our buildings are well maintained, that they are, heated, and that the lights are on. We have to make sure that our operations happen, that we have staff that can process payroll, that we can have staff, to be able to support, human resources, be able to hire and retain our teachers, or unfortunately, provide them with unemployment benefits and the such. So we don't really have a lot of wiggle room. Same thing with administration. I could be somewhat, biased, but I feel like we're a very small administrative staff in terms of school-based and central office, but we're going to sacrifice positions. There's just not many too. So again, you're not going to see significant savings there. And obviously, we've talked a little bit about increasing fees. It's not something we really want to do, and hopefully we don't have to do it. But it could come down to that, we are charging a significant amount of money to our students to be able to participate in extracurriculars. I think the other thing that has come up, and I share this only because we were asked about it, what's the impact on the high school and its accreditation? And so the last time that both towns found themselves in a financial challenging situation, we did have significant layoffs, was in the 2000s. And at that time, because we did have loss of electives, we had higher class size at the high school, and they weren't able to provide all of the programming that they're supposed to be under our accrediting board. The high school was placed on probation. We anticipate that could be the case going forward. We're certainly hopeful that it's not. The accrediting board certainly tries to work with us. They would, again, come in and look, but if we're having significant cuts to the high school, 20 plus, we certainly could find ourselves on, probationary status. But that will be something that may come. I can't say it'll happen for sure, but that is a possibility. I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Robinson. I'm happy to take any school questions. If anybody has any school questions, I'm happy to take them. And then certainly, I know there's some school staff that are going to stay as I transport myself over to Rainham. But so if there's questions that come up later, there will be some staff here. But I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have now about schools.
I just have three, actually. On the 5-year projection, what did you use for a town funding percentage for your revenue projection? Do you know? Like this year was 4.67. Did you use that for the next 5 years?
We didn't. We used an average of the past 5 years. So we averaged everything out for our going forward.
Okay. And the salary percentage for the on the expense side, do you know what you used there?
We do. We obviously took all of our contracts that had already been settled. We certainly have one that's in the process of being ratified. And so we used a projected salary there. Hopefully we will see some savings in those projections.
And then one other question. I believe that with school choice for 9th grade, if we're so concerned about having extra students, what was the rationale for approving school choice for 9th graders?
Sure. So again, with taking in school choice students, we actually take in dollars for those students. And so by limiting it to 9th grade, we actually put a cap on it, so it's not an open enrollment, so we wouldn't take 100 9th graders in. We did cap it, I believe, at 15 students, and so we felt as though that we could take in those 15 students and not. Obviously, class size is going to be high, right? So you could say that certainly there may be a burden, but by taking in those 15 students, we are taking in more dollars for those students.
But you're taking the dollars that they pay in their own district, right? So if everybody's looking for overrides, it's certainly not the cost that shows in the size of the cost of educating.
No, and what we get for school choice dollars is not does not equate to, say, a per pupil expenditure.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I'll be here for a few minutes if something comes up, but I'll turn it over to Ms. Robinson.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Thank you, everyone. So I'm going to turn over to a more general presentation, but first I wanted to let you know that we brought the team tonight. If you have questions about various town operations, we've got people here to help. Lori Greeny, our finance director, is here. Azu Etananru, our public works director, is here. Fire Chief Schlatz is here, and Police Lieutenant Heil is here. Besides me, they can answer very specific questions about how the override would impact their operations, both positively and negatively. So I'm going to start with just giving you a very quick general overview of the town's finances overall and how did we get to this point, and then I'm going to dig into the override, what it means for the town side of the operation. So very quickly, what is an override? In 1980, the state passed a law that said communities can't raise their levy by more than 2.5% each year without voters' approval. And so that is a permanent tax increase once it's voted in. It happens every single year unless voters choose to do an underride, which happens fairly seldom. And it's meant to be able, the purpose of it is to be able to, in a situation like this year, help us adjust to the costs that are simply higher than we are able to bear within the 2.5% increase for continued annual expenses, not capital expenses or one-time things. And then at the bottom, you can see that sometimes it's referred to in different ways, but it all means the same thing. So why do we need an override this year? I can tell you that even if the school district had come in at what we typically share with them, which this year was 4.67%, the town was needing to cut expenses to be able to balance its budget. We simply weren't going to be able to, for some of the reasons that the superintendent mentioned, able to balance Bridgewater's budget without making cuts ourselves. And we have done that to balance the budget that passed on May 15th. We are finding ourselves in a situation, as he mentioned, other towns are, where costs are going up more than we expected. For the school district specifically, you can see in the middle bullet, the increase that we typically share with them each year. Our revenue increase to them was 4.67, and their increase to us was 22.91%. But even if they had settled at 4.67, if they could have achieved what they needed to with their budget with that amount, we still needed to make reductions, and I'll go over those in a few minutes. So, sorry for the small numbers, but this we wanted to get on one slide, just a very quick snapshot of the town's overall situation. Our budget for FY26 is $79,977,000. The revenues are on the right and the expenditures are on the left, and that includes an additional $1,445,000 for the school district. And so where those revenue sources come from, 80% is property taxes. That's the blue part of the pie. That's very typical for a community like this. State aid monies that the state passes in its budget is 7%. Local receipts, which are things like excise taxes that you pay on cars, building permits, interest on our various bank accounts and investments, all those sorts of things and a few more, all meals taxes, all go into that 7%. And then there's some other small funding sources that make up the final 6%. So, in the high level, where does all the money go? 54% goes to education, not just to BR, but also to the various school districts that students choose to go to outside of BR. We get billed directly for those, for instance, from one of the agricultural schools or the regional technical school. Those are expenses on top of what we pay BR. And the balance of the budget is everything else that the town does on the general fund, 46%. And I'll give you some more details on how that breaks down. And here you go. Really what we do on the town side is people-based. Whether it's in police or fire or town hall, the library, we spend 82% of all of our budget on people and the benefits that we need to pay for, health insurance and workers' comp and things like that. And then the rest of the budget is, next biggest one is expenses. We buy fuel, we pay for utilities, we buy supplies, those sorts of things is 11%. Debt service, a little bit smaller, and then a very small percentage is assessments from the state. For instance, mosquito control services that we get through the county, we have to pay for that through our budget. And then just to break it down a little bit further, if you're interested in within the town side which departments it all goes to, the largest percentage, the red section of the pie, is public safety, police and fire. They're two of our bigger departments, and that makes up almost $14 million, or 47%. That's followed by benefits for all employees across all departments, 35% at $10.6 million. And then the smaller pieces of the pie are roadways and the town engineer, 4%, health and human services, 2%, general government salaries is 10%, that's town hall and some other costs, and then culture and recreation is one of the smaller ones. And just again, here's a list of things that we spend money on in case you're interested. On the left side of the screen is getting salaries and benefits and all the things that we need to provide to employees as an employer. And then the things that we buy are on the right side of the screen. Utilities, we pay for street lights. Like you, if you have a home or a car, we pay for insurance of various kinds. We have all kinds of software costs and cybersecurity tools that we need to have. We don't have any janitors. We contract it all out, but we buy janitorial services and building maintenance. We do also contract out grounds maintenance. We need to buy medical supplies for ambulances, and we pay an outside service to handle the billing for us because they do it better than we can and very likely much less expensive. We also don't have an animal control officer. We have one, but we contract that out to an outside firm. And then Public Works probably spends almost the most money in expenses. Tree work, they buy road salt, they paint lines on roads, buy street patch materials and all sorts of things like that. And then like everybody, we pay for vehicle maintenance, we buy fuel, things like that. But all that together just makes up the right side, 11% of the budget. We've gotten some questions about debt service. Over the years, the voters have approved various debt exclusions, which is to pay for a major capital project, such as the high school, such as the Mitchell School. That's a separate amount that gets factored into the tax rate. And this is a list of all the debt service on all the projects that we have, when they originated, when they mature, and next year's budget. It's $6,685,000, and the question we get the most is the new fire station in this or out? It's in. It's already factored into the tax bills. Not fully, because it's interest only the first year, but it is already being charged. So for me, this is the most one of the more important slides to help everyone understand that we really strive to balance our budget, and we have balanced our budget within a 2.5% increase each year, and perhaps any other increases in local receipts that we might be able to have, or new growth, such as new homes or businesses. But we aren't able to balance the budget with some of the factors that you see on the screen. For example, the Bristol Agricultural School, the tuition increase is almost 54% from last year. Why is that? Because they have more students coming from Bridgewater, and the cost of tuition has gone up. And so we simply had to absorb that cost. We have no choice except to pay it, which we're glad to support those students, but it's still a cost that we hadn't expected that high. You also see the BR increase at just under 23%. But you also see the Bristol Plymouth Tech School, that was a 16% increase. And then we pay for pensions for our employees. We're required to put them into the Plymouth County pension system. No public employees pay into Social Security here. And that obligation, again, we can't impact that at all or influence it, and that's almost 14%. And then for us, health insurance is up 6.75%. That's still, is a cost greater than we had available to pay for, but we haven't had quite the same experience that the schools had. It's actually a low one of the ones I've heard about this year, but it's still an impact for Bridgewater that we had to manage. Just wanted to give us a quick snapshot for people to understand where property values and tax bills have gone over the last 6 years. On the left side, you can see the growth in home values in Bridgewater from just under $400,000 in 2020 up to just under $600,000 this year. And then single-family tax bills have risen at about a similar scale from $5,800 to just over $7,000. And what that slide tells me is that you can see the 2.5% tax increase has been a slow progression upwards as values have gone up as well. And then this is just a different slide if you like to see the information differently of where that average tax bill goes. $163 goes to public works, public safety, just over $1,300 of that $7,000 tax bill. But the big one over on the right-hand side of the screen at the top is schools. As I mentioned earlier, it represents 54% of that bill, or just under $3,800 a year. So we thought it was important just to help everyone understand that compared to the tax bill that average house pays this year, which is $7,000 at the bottom of the screen, we wanted to show you what it meant taking a wider lens, which is the average state, the cost of a per pupil student in 2023, which is the most recent data the state provides us, was just under $22,000 a year. The lowest one, conversely, was just over $11,000 a year, and Bridgewater Raynham this year in the budget that's in front of us was $16,122. So very simply put, if a home has one student in it, it costs $9,000 approximately more to educate that student in Bridgewater than the tax bill pays. And if there's more than one student in a home, I think you can understand the math that achieves. So getting into the override, it's a total of just over $8 million, and these are the 4 areas that are covered. The largest amount is for the Bridgewater Raynham School District. This is simply the difference between what they have requested from us and what is included in our budget today, just over $6 million. The town council considered various other costs and impacts to our operations and taxpayers and decided to add the other 3 items. First one is to fund some critical road repairs and try to start to catch up on the work that we need to do to maintain roads. Also wanted to restore some budgetary service cuts that we made in order to balance the budget this year. There are some losses of positions that we'll go over. That's just over $422,000. And then the balance is we really have identified some critical positions that we haven't been able to add over the years, trying to keep that tax bill, as low as we can. But it's time to really start to make those targeted investments in police, fire, public works, and the library. And so we'll talk about those in a minute as well. So this is just another way to look at the difference in the school budget. You saw the number at the top that the superintendent mentioned. That's the total certified school budget. Just over $40,600,000 is in our budget now. That's what's allocated to Bridgewater. Our share that we've put in the budget is $34,600,000 or so, and the difference is the amount that's in the override, just to help you see where the math comes from. So as I mentioned, we felt it was important to restore some positions. We had to cut these in order to get to the balanced budget that we've passed in May. One of them is a firefighter paramedic. We will be losing positions. Someone is retiring, we're not going to be able to fill. That starts to make an impact in service delivery, especially when there's high call volume that the chief can talk more about. We also have eliminated a police cadet position. Police cadets are not fully trained police officers yet, but they're keen to become one day. And they serve us. We have had 4 of them. We're going to go down to 3. They support police officers in the 911 center at the police station answering calls. If you've ever been in a 911 station, I can tell you that sometimes a call comes in and someone just needs information or has got a call that can be easily dispatched. But calls can get very complicated, need multiple responses by different agencies, and one person with one phone, you can imagine how that can become overwhelming. Those cadets support that, and so if we aren't able to fill that, we may have to call an officer in off the road or change the way we staff in some ways, and that could be challenging. We also have to go down to taking out dollars for a deputy building official. We have one building official in town, which is actually, I think, quite low for a town of our size. He takes care of all of the plan reviews, inspections, issuing of permits for buildings, but he's really not able to spend as much time as we should be doing on code enforcement and zoning matters. We'd like to try to keep one part-time position in at least, if not full-time. And then we also cut public works heavy equipment labor. This is in the highway division, trying to make sure we're taking care of our roads and public spaces. We have 7 people in the highway division right now, Azu. And again, for me, having worked in a number of communities, I think that's quite low for the work that's required, and we wanted to be able to restore one of those. We also made cuts in things like taking care of our buildings, fire supplies, building vehicle repairs, library books and supplies, the sorts of things that we think are critical. We want to take care of our buildings. We want to make sure that the library's experience is what it should be for our community. We do want to add those things back. All of these things together are the $422,000 that I had on that previous slide. So we also, as I said, identified some service gaps. I'm quite impressed at how Bridgewater has managed its budget over the years and kept it, I think, as tight as it has been. But we clearly see things coming that we need to work on. First one is adding 4 firefighter paramedic positions. When the new fire station opens on Pleasant Street, we will be moving the central station further to one side of town, and we have another station on the east side of town, Station 2. That's going to mean that call response times are going to change a little bit, which the chief can tell you a lot more about than I. But we need to add a person to Station 2 on each of the 4 shifts that we have. Our firefighter paramedics work 24-hour shifts. To be able to make sure that our staff are safe and responding appropriately when they get to various calls. And so we realize we need to add 4 people to be able to deal with that. We also want to add 2 police officer positions. In a community such as Bridgewater, for its size and complexity, we really probably should have 52 to 55 police officers doing various roles. We have 45. And that includes the chief. And so we have identified that we really need to pay more attention to a school resource officer. We have one primarily here at the high school, not able to get around to the other schools and support those populations. So want to dedicate one school resource officer to that. And then major crimes and a drug task force. It seems disappointing to say we need to focus on that, but every community does. And making sure that we're doing our part with our regional partners where necessary, and dealing with the sorts of crimes that maybe weren't crimes that we thought would happen years ago, whether it's scams or internet things that become an issue in communities. We need to pay more attention to that and be able to support people who are going through those sorts of things. We've also identified that a social worker or a mental health person is important in this day and age. We recognize that whether it's police or fire or our council on aging, or even people who come to the library, there are people who in our community, in every community, who are dealing with various issues in life, crises and whatever. And sometimes the right response is somebody who can bring that experience and expertise to dealing with a situation and help our staff be better able to deal with situations that they get to. This is one person. They're not going to be able to be out there all the time, but sometimes they will be able to say support our police department going to calls, and that might be the exact right response to somebody in need. And so we recognize we need to deal with that. We also want to better support the library. Right now, the library they are doing great things. They're exceedingly busy. They have people signed up for programs that can't get in because they are overprescribed. And that's wonderful, but we're actually not open all the hours that we're supposed to be receiving a state grant that we do every year of about $65,000. We need to add 3.5 hours a week to our schedule to be able to serve the public and meet that requirement. The state hasn't taken it away. They've been understanding over the years, but we don't want to push that too far. And also, it's a building that's actually got 3 levels. And so there's times where there's just 2 people in the building, which I would say in a building of that size is not a great schedule. And so we want to be able to address that. And then lastly, recreation and parks. We have added about 37% more in acreage of parks in the last couple of years. Styles and Hearts, the one you may know the best. And we have one part-time person, 13 to 15 hours a week, who is tasked with keeping up with those 246 acres to check on them, help people use them, deal with situations that arise, and we need to add some hours to his schedule to be able to do a better job of taking care of those important assets. And then lastly, but not least, getting into roads. We have 107 miles of road that we're responsible for, and I have heard loud and clear in my time here that they're not great in some areas, right? Even Azu is nodding his head. We get a D- right now, but I have to tell you, unfortunately, you're not alone. There are a lot of communities are not doing as well as they'd like to be because road materials don't hold up how they did 20 and 30 years ago. They used to be you could pave a road and walk away for 20 years. What do we get now, Azu? 10, if we're lucky? The material is just not quite what it used to. This is not going to solve Bridgewater's issues with some of the major roads that people ask about. I'm not going to stand here and promise you that, but what we do want to do is start to make more of an indentation in what we need to catch up on. And so we have been just relying on what the state provides us. It's called Chapter 90. It's $750,000 a year for Bridgewater. Every community gets it based on a formula, and that gets us about 2 miles. You can easily do the math and realize that that doesn't help you catch up. The state is looking at increasing that by about 50%, so we'd get just over $1 million, which is great, but we want to try and do a little better. And I have found in other communities that once you make an effort, you start with a number and you slowly add to it as you can afford to, you'll turn around in a couple of years and go, wow, we're catching up. And that's really what the goal is here. The money that we're asking for at $500,000 would get us about 1.4 miles, and DPW is targeted doing Main Street from Central Square to High Street. He can get into how we prioritize roads better than I can, but we focus on high traffic and high volume usage first, and things like cul-de-sacs are a little lower on the scale, but that's what we would use this money for this year, and then plan to include this specifically for DPW and roads every year going forward to keep working towards catching up. And then again, I'm sorry for the small print. This is a form directly from the state. They have a terrific website that gives you all kinds of data. And this page is simply it shows if you put in the amount of the override, which is the top middle box next to the word calculate, put in the exact amount of this override, and it calculates for Bridgewater that based on the number of properties we have and the values that the tax levy would go up by $1.56 per thousand if this override was to pass, and the average single-family tax bill impact is just over $926 a year. That's based on an assessed value of $593,000. And then the bottom of the screen shows you what the tax impact would be for homes that cost more than that and less than that. We actually have a tax calculator right on the website on the override page. You can look up your own property value. You can plug in that number and find out exactly what it means for you. And it breaks it down for how much would go for schools, how much would go for the road work, and the 2 items for the town departments. So I'd urge everybody to take a look at that. And that concludes what I wanted to talk about tonight. But as I said, I brought the team, and we would be thrilled to be able to answer questions that you have, because the goal is to answer those and give you as much information as you need to be able to make decisions. But we have, like I said, on the website, frequently asked questions. We've been posting answers to questions that we get, so you can ask those anonymously and have us answer them. But thank you for coming. Thank you to BTV for being here to film this so people who couldn't make it tonight can watch it. So with that.
I have a question regarding healthcare costs.
Mm-hmm.
What is the breakdown in terms of percentage for an employee in a town?
So it varies by the group of employees on the town side. We have some employees are at pay 25%, and the town pays 75%. We have been working with our unions to, as new employees come on, and we settle those contracts to have new employees pay that amount. There are some that are less that from prior contracts, trying to get everybody up to the same level sharing. Thank you, great question.
My only question is about BP.
Okay.
2 years ago, we voted for the override, and it was approved. So that's Taunton, Berkeley, Bridgewater, Raynham. Have we started paying on that?
Bring the expert.
Hi. Yes, we have. So it went
When
on
did we start paying on it?
2 years ago. We made the first interest payment. They have since bonded, and if we go back,
The school's being built now.
right,
You well know, I'm sure.
right.
The school's being built. My one concern was,
In 2026, the payment that they listed is $903,000. So that's the amount that will be due from Bridgewater as a member town.
okay, and how long will we be paying that?
It'll go, I believe it's 20 years, or 56? Yeah.
Is it 26? Okay.
I mean 30 years, sorry. Sorry, mostly they're 20 years now. The new, most of the buildings now are going for 30 years.
Okay. My one frustration, the reason why my husband and I came tonight, was yesterday I called Town Hall, talked to the assessor's office, talked to the town manager office, put me down to Treasury, and that was my question. When did we start paying it? Have we started paying it? And nobody knew the answer to that. So they put me through to, they said the accountant would be getting back to me today. I never heard from anyone. I just find it hard to believe that all those offices didn't have an answer for me. And now you're telling me we've already started paying, which is, that was the answer I was asking for. But I just thought it was sad that all these, I mean, you figure you call the tax assessor's office, and they'd be able to tell you if you're paying BP.
Yeah.
The override that we did. And a lot of them didn't even know we had that 2 years ago. And I was informed a lot of people that were there aren't from the Bridgewater area, so they're unaware of it.
Right, I apologize for that. Somebody in the finance department or the treasurer collector should have been able to handle that.
They passed me to the accountant's office.
Okay, well,
So I was passed to 4 offices.
well, I
was very
apologize.
frustrated with that.
Yeah,
Very,
I'll,
very frustrated.
so if it came to me, I wasn't in yesterday, so maybe they would put you through to my
I
voicemail.
called this morning and talked to somebody in the treasury office.
Right,
And she said she had gotten my message, and she passed it on to the accountant.
okay.
I said, well, doesn't anybody know that? I mean,
Yeah, no, I'm sorry,
okay.
you know, if you come see me afterward,
Future questions regarding that,
Mhm.
who should I be speaking to?
you can, town manager's office or the finance director, you can call me directly if you have any questions.
What was your name again?
Lori Guarini.
Laura. Thanks, Laura.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Laura, can you just explain that it's a debt exclusion too, rather than override versus how Raymond's doing it?
Right, so on this, thanks. So on this form, you'll see the debt exclusion sources. So those are the votes that you've taken as a debt exclusion, meaning as soon as these are paid off, they come off the tax roll. They're not on the levy anymore. The other ones in the levy limit were just voted and they come out of the town operation for debt service. Right, 2.5 over 2.5. So the debt exclusion, like there are a couple that will be coming off of the tax levy. You'll see the maturity date for the Bridgewater Middle School is next year's the last payment for that. And your new high school is off in 2027. So that's been 20 years since that went on. So that's coming off, and you can see that payment is about $660,000. So
that will be put back into.
So that just comes off of the roll. So that means it comes off of your tax. It's not into the calculation of the tax. And so none of the debt exclusions are in the calculation of the 2.5. So when you start off, you take those numbers. Well, they're not included in the levy. So we add them in the levy every year. And then when the debt service drops off, then it's off the levy. So it's not on your taxes anymore. So that's how that formula works.
Thanks, Laura.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentleman in the back.
The $500,000 that you're looking for the roads, how much of that is actually going to be to replace the existing paved roads versus using it for patchwork? Because quite honestly, I'm sure a lot of other citizens in this town, taxpayers, are really fed up with the patchwork that's being done on roads that have been patched and patched and patched. And in conjunction with that, how much of the $750,000 that we get from the state, how much of that has been spent actually on replacing the existing asphalt, grinding it up, getting it out of there, and putting in the new roads? Now, I know that there's work being done on Flag Street, which is horrendous, but there were other streets as well. And if this goes through, if I vote for it, I'd like to know how much of that $500,000 is actually going for new roads. I don't want to see any of that money go for patchwork. Do you have
I'm going to give this to the Public Works Director. I know the answer, but I'll let them answer.
So that's an excellent question. Appreciate that.
Sure.
So all that money will go 100% to paving, new paving. The patchwork that we do comes from the existing operating budget. So that doesn't really do much for paving a roadway. Approximately takes about $370,000 to mill and pave 1 mile of a roadway.
And who will be making the decisions as to what roads need to be replaced?
That'll be myself and the highway superintendent.
And how is that assessment performed?
Okay, so excellent question. So we have what we call street scan. And it's a computer model that we use to rate all the different roads. So it depends on the crack of the roadway, the condition of the roadbed. We do coring on the roads to see what they look like. But most importantly, we take a look at, for example, if I had a problem with, let's say, Route 104, from the Central Square to the highway, right to 24. If I had a need to fix that road, that would take precedence, for example, over a road that basically serves 5 or 6 homes. So the condition of the road and how much mileage I can get out of that is what determines where we put that money in. So if a road, for example, is in a good condition, it's just that the pavement is so falling apart, right? And I'm going to get a mile done on that road versus trying to dig up a roadway like what we did on Summer Street. That required a full depth excavation, which means that we had to reconstruct the roadbed. All that, what we did on Summer Street, that was from that chapter 90 funding that we get. Okay, so this $500,000, for example, if we get this one, that'll go to Main Street. Main Street is a heavily traveled roadway. Some of the money that we currently have from Chapter 90, we're going to be doing that on South Street. South Street goes through, that will take us from Central Square all the way to Crescent Street. So that's how the volume of traffic that utilizes a roadway. You know, if you have a roadway that takes a lot of traffic, it's going to get built up quicker. And then some of them, if they need drainage, we do that too.
Now, I know that what you have up there is 1.4 miles on average.
Mm-hmm.
But the condition of the existing roads is going to dictate, really, you're going to get 500,000, 1.4 miles out of 500,000, or is actually going to be 3/4 of a mile, given the condition and what the work that has to be done underneath. Am I correct in that?
That's correct. So if I have to, if the road bed, which is the gravel underneath, and I don't have any drainage problems, and the road bed is good, then it will be basically milling existing pavement and putting that up. That is $370,000 a mile. If I have to dig it up, do the curbing, that's about $680,000 a mile.
My last question is, are there any state roads that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is responsible for, such as 28, 104? Are they responsible for paving and that?
Yes, actually, yes. If you look at Broad Street and Bedford Street, those are state highway. If you'll notice, last year, the state paved basically from Roach Brothers towards East Bridgewater. So that is 100% state road. We don't take care of that. The state takes care of that.
Thanks very much.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it.
Having worked in a number of other communities, I can tell you that I'm pleased that Bridgewater really works to spend every dollar of that state money that we get on actual paving. The state does allow you to use it for some other expenses, but other than perhaps investing in the computer modeling that Azu talked about, we put every dollar into actually paving. Any other questions, or for our public safety folks, if anyone's got any questions about that, because that's important. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. It's been great to have you here. I really appreciate your questions and just coming out tonight on a rather rainy, cold Tuesday. Please see our website. Please give us a call if you have any questions that we can answer. And thank you.